The end of Perik Aleph of Bamidbar, we have three psukim that we're going to be discussing. So Pasuk Nun Aleph, the Pasuk says that the Levim are the ones that need to set up the Mishkan. V'hazor hakarev yumos, any foreigner that gets close, not a Levi, will be put to death. The next Pasuk says the Yidden need to camp all around, each one in their own groups, each one with their own banners. That's Pasuk Nun Beis. In Pasuk Nun Gimel it says had Levim camp right around the Mishkan, and then the Pasuk says below Yeketzef ha'adas b'nei Yisrael, there won't be an anger on the Yidden. This is the main point that we're going to be discussing in our Sikha about what anger we're talking about and what's going on in this Pasuk. So Rashi says on these words below Yeketzef, im ta'asukim mitzvos, if you follow my mitzvahs, there won't be anger. But if not, if foreigners go into the avodah of the Levim, then there will be an anger. So the Rebbe, number one, asks, Rashi a number of times told us already the rule that from the negative we can understand the positive. So if the Pasuk says clearly that lo yeketzev, there won't be an anger if you do what you're supposed to, so then clearly we understand that if you don't do what you're supposed to, there will be an anger. So what's Rashi actually telling us? Even if you want to say that Rashi is mainly coming to say, trying to emphasize that the point of our pasuk is to tell us about this punishment, nevertheless, says the Rebbe, it's still not fully understood. Why this whole arichos, that seemingly a very long Rashi, if you do like my mitzvahs, there won't be anger. If not, foreigners come into your avodah, there will be an anger. Rashi could just say very simply and briefly, there won't be an anger, but if you don't do this, then there will be anger. So there are Mefarshim that answer that Rashi is trying to tell us that who the anger is referring to. Because if we read the Pasuk simply, the Pasuk started off about Levim camping there. So you might think we're speaking about that if they don't do what they're supposed to, there will be some sort of anger on the Levim. So Rashi is saying no. We're speaking about that if other Yidden are going to come in to do the Avodah, then they're going to be put to death. In other words, this is going back to two psukim back where we said before, V'hazor hakarev, the foreigner that comes close, will be put to death. Says the Rebbe, but this is also not understood. Because number one, it still seems that there's extra words in Rashi over here. Why does Rashi say, Im ta'asukim mitzvos, if you do like my mitzvahs, there won't be an anger? Again, Rashi could have just started off by saying, if foreigners come in, then Hashem will be angry. And furthermore, the Rebbe says, even if Rashi does want to start off with a positive, why does Rashi say, Im ta'asukim mitzvos, you just do my mitzvahs? He should have seemingly said, if people won't come in, if foreigners won't come in, then I won't be angry. Also the expression, Shikonsu zorim bavidosam zu, foreigners will come into this avodah. If Rashi is going back to that previous pasuk of Azora Korev Yumus, of a foreigner approaching the avodah will be put to death, so instead of Yikonsu, Rashi should have just said Hakorev. And also the Rebbe asks, why zorim in the plural? The Rebbe now moves to the next part of Rashi and says, Rashi tells us, as we find in the story of Korach, where there it says, Ki yotza haketzev, that Hashem got angry. And the question is, number one, does Rashi have to prove over here that if Hashem says he'll be angry, he's actually going to get angry and punish? What's Rashi trying to prove? Furthermore, the story of Korach seems to be actually quite different to our story. Doesn't seem to be the same idea. In our case, Rashi is speaking about foreigners coming to do the avodah of the Levim. In the story of Korach, the time where the Pasuk says that the anger came out and Yidden were dying, is after the story of Korach, the following day, when Yidden were complaining that Moshe and Aaron killed Am Hashem, the nation of Hashem, so they start dying. So this seems to be not the same Aveira that we're even talking about over here. Furthermore, even if we speak about the Aveira of the 250 people, bringing the Ktoires in the story of Korach, the problem over there was that Levim were doing the avodah of the Koyanim. In other words, that problem over there is even for a Levi, whereas in our pasuk we're speaking about Yisraelim not doing the avodah of the Levim. So again, it's very, very different. So the Rebbe says, some Mefarshim want to say that what Rashi is trying to prove from Korach is that when it says V'hazor hakarev yumas in our previous pasuk that we mentioned, if a foreigner does the avodah, will be put to death. Don't think it means be put to death by Beis Din, bidei Adam, but it means bidei Shamayim. And Rashi is proving this from the story of Korach, because there also we have an expression, Ketzef, and there Hashem was the one that put them to death. But the Rebbe says there seems to be a very, very big doichek, because in our Rashi, where Rashi is translating the word ketzef, telling us about the anger, he doesn't seem to be going back to that previous pasuk of that yumus that put to death. If a foreigner does the avodah, going to be put to death b'dei shamayim. It sounds more like Rashi is saying that we're trying to prove from Koirach the actual idea itself, that if foreigners come to do the avodah, then Hashem will get angry. Says the Rebbe, in order to explain all of this, we're first going to look at a bigger picture which is really bothering Rashi. And that is, again, we mentioned 3 psukim. We have a pasuk, v'azor hakarev, yumus, a foreigner that comes to do the avodah will be put to death. We have our pasuk, v'lo yeketzav, Hashem shouldn't be angry. But in between that, we have a pasuk that speaks about how the Yidden are camping, each one in their own places. And then the beginning of the pasuk of v'lo yeketzav, about the Leviim camping right around the Mishkan. So then the question becomes, when it says after the Leviim camping, v'lo yeketzav, there won't be anger, what is this referring to? If it's going back to the point of foreigners not going and doing the avodah of the Leviim, then the question is, how do these other psukim come right in between foreigners that are doing the avodah? And why are we suddenly discussing this idea where the Yidden camp, where the Leviim camp? And also, what is our pasuk adding to the fact that we said already before, a foreigner that's going to do the avodah is going to be put to death? What is our pasuk adding by saying that Hashem will be angry? On the other hand, if we say v'lo yeketzav is the anger speaking about only about the Leviim, in other words, if the Leviim don't camp in the right place, and that's going to bring anger, so then the question becomes, but the pasuk clearly says that there won't be an anger al hadas b'nei Yisrael. It's somehow to do with the rest of the Yidden, not the Leviim. So what's going on? And this is what Rashi is trying to deal with. So Rashi says, "Im ta'asukim mitzvos, if you'll do like my mitzvahs, there won't be anger. But if foreigners go into your avodah, there will be an anger." What's Rashi telling us? What Rashi is saying is that with these words, v'lo yeketzav, that there won't be anger, that says in connection to the Leviim camping around the Mishkan, is because that will ensure, when they camp around the Mishkan, that will ensure that there shouldn't be anger on the Bnei Yisrael. And what Rashi says is like this: Im ta'asu k'mitzvos, if you'll do like my mitzvahs, meaning you will camp exactly where you're supposed to be camping, the Yidden will camp where they're supposed to be camping, and you'll camp where you're supposed to be camping, that's going to make sure that there's no anger. But if not, then that's going to end up leading into the fact that foreigners are going to go and do your avodah, and therefore that will really bring out the anger of Hashem on the Yidden. In other words, like this: the main point of our parsha was really discussing a general idea of separation, borders, boundaries of where Yidden need to be, where Hashem wants the Yidden to be, where Hashem wants the Leviim to be. And automatically, if everyone's in the right places, this also won't cause that foreigners will approach the Mishkan. And this is what the Torah is saying. V'chanu b'nei Yisrael, the Yidden will camp each one in their own place, with their own banners. But it's not only to ensure that no one approaches the Mishkan. It's really a command for itself, that we need to make sure that everyone knows where they belong, where their specific places, and that we keep the boundaries that Hashem set up. In continuation to this, the Torah is saying, the Leviim will camp right around the Mishkan, and then there won't be anger. The Torah is trying to tell us how serious it is to make sure to keep the boundaries, to keep the separations. And with this, we'll make sure that the anger won't come out practically. And this is what Rashi says: Im ta'asukim mitzvos, if you will keep my mitzvahs, keep the boundaries, then there won't be anger. But from the negative, we understand, on the other hand, that if the boundaries will be broken down, there will be some sort of anger. But even at this point, the anger is only in potential. But if as a result of this now, the foreigners come in and actually approach the Mishkan to get involved in the Mishkan, then the anger will actually come down practically as well. Says the Rebbe, now we can understand Rashi's wording, where Rashi doesn't say v'hazor hakarev. Rashi says sheyikonsu zorim, and he also says it in the plural, because we're speaking about two different things. In the previous pasuk, when it says v'hazor hakarev, we're speaking about doing the avodah. So first of all, it's a single person, zor. Even one person doing the avodah is already a problem. And second of all, we understand the word karev. He's approaching to try to help set up the Mishkan, etc. But in our pasuk, we're speaking about something else. We're speaking about this breaking of barriers, breaking of boundaries. If one person comes into the Machane Leviah, it's not like as if he set up a whole new camp. So Rashi says, Yikonsu, if a whole bunch of people start coming in to settle in the Machane Leviah, in the camp of the Leviim. That's Zorim and he says Zorim in the plural, because they're coming in, not only approaching, like to do the Avodah, and it's a lot of people, that's where the problem started. It's as if you're starting to mix up the camps. The Rebbe says, now we can also understand the similarity or the proof from the story of Kairach. Rashi is trying to show these two ideas, these two extremes. How on the one hand, breaking down the barriers is already could cause some sort of anger, but in the meantime, it's only the potential. But on the other hand, when is the anger really going to come out? When it translates into action. And we see this in the story of Kairach. You first have Kairach trying to break down the barriers between Koyanim and the rest of the Yidden as well. And this brings out a certain anger of Hashem on the rest of the Yidden. But on the other hand, practically, when does this come out? It's only after Kairach, in fact, carries on with his machloikas. And they go and the 250 people go and they bring the Ktoiris. And then the Yidden go and complain as well. This is when the anger of Hashem comes out practically and brings the plague. And from there, the Rebbe learns a fascinating hayrah of how careful we need to be towards another Yid. Even though Kairach gathered all the people already, I made a machloikas against Moshe Rabbeinu. Nevertheless, the anger of Hashem didn't come out yet. As long as Kairach was only arguing and speaking, etc., it didn't express itself in action. The punishment didn't come yet. It's only after he acted this way, after a strong warning, and they go ahead and bring the Ktoiris, then the anger comes out. First, the punishment on them, and then a Magefa on the Yidden as well. So the Rebbe says, when we see a Yid that's lacking in certain things, not holding back from certain inappropriate things, etc., but as long as it's not coming out into a ma'aseh, a point to an action of fighting against Hashem, and he's still at this point where he's in a certain state, he's certain negative things, but it didn't come down into the practical and actions yet, then he's still 100% beloved to Hashem and finds favor in the eyes of Hashem. There's no anger, chas v'shalom. And on the contrary, Hashem loves him and Hashem helps him to do tshuva, and then he becomes completely beloved once again to Hashem.